Hello, hello. Welcome to another Cleverly Changing podcast. I am one of your co hosts, Elle, and this is another live episode. I'm really excited to talk to you for the last week of our Homeschool Hints series. My podcast is on the cleverlychanging.com website, and you would go to the top tab and go to podcasts in order to find our latest podcast. We are also on different podcast platforms like Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, which is, Apple Podcasts. Also, you can find us on iHeartRadio, but definitely tell a friend about our podcast. Feel free to share these live episodes with someone else who is interested in learning more about educating their children. The Cleverly Changing podcast is not just for homeschoolers, but it is also for people who want to supplement their child's education. So we have an audio series that runs bi-weekly, and I encourage you to check it out. We have been doing our lives for, this is actually going into the third week where we're talking about homeschooling because people all over the world are starting to homeschool and really think about it seriously because of the pandemic. So we wanted to take some time. I have been homeschooling my twin daughters who are 11 for 6 years. And I am really happy to be able to share some of the tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. And also, I've been very transparent about some of the mistakes I've made so that you don't have to make those. But today, I wanted to talk to you guys, not a long conversation, but there are certain terms that we hear in the podcast world that you may not be familiar with. And so before we really get into what those terms are, I just want to say if you are watching today, please say hi in the comments section, but also feel free to share this podcast with someone else. So share it on your Facebook page so that other people can join us. Feel free to make this conversation interactive. So if you have questions, you can go ahead and leave them in the comments section. Also, I want you to know that if you are watching the replay, leave the word replay in the comments section so that I'll know that people are also watching the replay. All right, so I want to jump in and tell you about today's topic. And that is, what is the difference between co-ops, tutorials, homeschool groups, and umbrellas? So those are some of the terms that you may hear in the homeschool world that you may not be completely familiar with. So let me say them again. Co-ops, tutorials, homeschool groups, and also umbrellas. So that term umbrella group, so you may have an umbrella school or an umbrella group. What are those things? So we're going to start with the one tutorial. We're going to start with the word tutorial. What is a tutorial? So if you think you know what a tutorial is, feel free to go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section and let us know, what do you think a tutorial is? Now, again, I am a homeschooler in Maryland, and I have been homeschooling for about going into my 7th year. So these terms and my understanding of them are really going to be based on my area. So the way in Maryland, the way we view a tutorial is it can be an area or a group or a school that is an unofficial school, but really it's a gathering where people are tutoring your child. So your kid can actually take classes at a tutorial, and they may have their own curriculum, but there is a set of instruction, and your kids are learning from an actual tutor. That person could have expertise in that particular subject, but they are teaching other people's kids about a particular subject, and those are called tutorials. A lot of homeschoolers often use tutorials for subjects that they may not be completely comfortable teaching themselves, or just for the socialization aspect, because socialization is important. And it's not just important to people who send their kids to a traditional school, it's also important to people who homeschool their kids as well. So by sharing that, by putting your kids and enrolling them in a tutorial, it gives them an opportunity to learn from someone else. And often that person does have an expertise in that area. And so tutorials may sometimes have a cost. A lot of times they do, because there is someone who is regularly tutoring your kids. So if that person, it's not usually different tutors, it's usually one person that tutors for that semester and so forth. So it's very typical of a class that you would take anywhere else, but they're called tutorials. And so here's the thing, you will pay a fee in order to get that regular instruction. So all tutorials don't have to have a fee, but most do. And so that is really how they are structured. But it does give your kids an opportunity to sit in a classroom with other kids, or sit in a room, because they don't always use a school. They could use a church, they could use a library, they could use, it just depends on what facility is available. So people will use different types of facilities. And that's really what a tutorial is. And it is very similar to school. So it's something that is a model that many of us who went to a traditional school would be familiar with. But there are tutors and the kids are being taught. The other term that I brought up is co-op. So that is a very, very common word in the homeschool world. And there aren't necessarily really hard and true definitions. So the definitions that I'm sharing with you will vary depending on where you are and the co-op itself. But this is really the general information about a co-op. So a co-op is a group of people who have gotten together and they agree that the parents are going to be involved some kind of way. So a co-op generally, sometimes they are drop-off programs where you can literally take your kids and drop them off like a school. And in some cases, you can just sign up and help out when you are available. In other cases, it is not a drop-off program. You will be required to actually stay with your child, or more than one child, with your child or children for a longer period of time. And that is what a co-op is, where you can take classes just like a tutorial. You can get together for PE, you can get together for book discussions, you can get together for art, you can get together for whatever reason. Sometimes there is a fee involved, but when it says co-op, that is cooperation. So in some ways, you are cooperating and working together with that group. So I have attended co-ops in the past, and there is some level of parent participation within a co-op. And so that is what you are agreeing to, and something that homeschoolers often, you'll hear homeschoolers talk a lot about co-ops, because that is one place where homeschoolers do a lot of socialization and get together with other people who are like-minded. There are all different types of co-ops, so that is something that you can research if it interests you. The other term that I shared was homeschool group. And a homeschool group is a lot less formal than the first two that I named. And the first two was a tutorial and also a co-op. So a homeschool group could literally be just a group of parents saying, hey, I homeschool my child, you homeschool your child, let's get together at a certain time. Perhaps they do it regularly, perhaps they're spontaneous about it. It's not really a rule, but it is people who are agreeing to get together and allow their kids to socialize together. And they could do formal instruction. They may do no formal instruction. It could literally just be getting together for a bunch of play dates. But that varies to what the co-op, not the co-op, what the homeschool group is. So I have participated in homeschool groups as well. The last homeschool group I participated in, it was a PE group. So we got together, it was an informal class, and each of the parents who were a part of it actually led out in the homeschool group. So it's something that is what you make it. And so that's really what a homeschool group is. It can be a lot of kids or only a little. It kind of varies. But a homeschool group is typically informal. And a lot of times there is no fee to the group because all of the parents who are participating are also giving the same level of attention to the students. So they may rotate and teach the class, or they may, one parent can be supervising and then the next week another parent. So it kind of varies. So that's typically what a homeschool group is. The next term and the last term that we'll talk about is an umbrella. So that one is probably the most unique name that I've mentioned today. So again, the first three that I mentioned was a tutorial, a co-op, and then a homeschool group. And now we're talking about an umbrella. So when you hear the term umbrella, what a person is talking about, especially in the state of Maryland, because that's where I'm from. So that's how I know these terms as it relates to me and our homeschool. Well, a homeschool umbrella is basically a group or a school that oversees your homeschool education. So in the state of Maryland, you have to meet with the Department of Education twice a year, in the fall and in the spring. But if you sign up under umbrella, you do not, because the umbrella is saying that that your family agrees to meet with them, and whoever is in charge of the umbrella, they actually look at your work and make sure your child is up to par and learning on the at the rate that they're supposed to. So umbrella it can be kind of formal because it is usually a cost involved, because you have people who are overseeing the materials, and they often, sometimes they teach classes. Sometimes you can sign up for instruction and an advisory partnership where someone who has already homeschooled is actually connected with you and talking to you about how to homeschool. So it could be an advisory situation, but all in all, an umbrella is a service or a group that oversees that education and homeschool process that you're doing with your family. And so with these other things like the homeschool tutorial, they're not really evaluating the work based on what you deliver to the state. They're just making sure that your child is learning whatever subject you signed up for. So that's where it's different. The umbrella really acts as a liaison, so to speak. And none of these other groups, they have nothing to do with whether you're compliant to your state homeschool laws or not. They're not necessarily talking about that. They may, but that's their choice. And that's not necessarily their whole entire role. An umbrella, it is their role to look at what you're doing, what you're teaching, and to talk to you about it. Also, an umbrella may help you put together your attendance records. Also, they could help you put together your transcripts if your state requires transcripts. So they really help you when it comes to compliance, more so than all the other three. And so that's really how they differ. So again, there are 4 different types of homeschool groups. There's tutorials, homeschool groups, co-ops, and also umbrellas. So if you have any questions about any of those names, go ahead and leave your question in the comments section below. Before we go, I do have some questions that you should ask before you join a co-op. Now, I put this post on my website, cleverlychanging.com, some years ago when I first started homeschooling. And so it is a post that already exists. Once this conversation is over, I will definitely link to this post in the comment section so that you can review it and see it. So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to read you the 10 questions that you should ask before committing to a homeschool group or a co-op. Okay, so first ask whether you attend at least one, whether you can attend at least one or two gatherings without a commitment. So before you actually pay money for a tutorial, homeschool group, co-op, or umbrella, see if you can just sit in and see what it involves, what it entails, who the people are, just to have a better understanding if this group fits with your values, if you feel comfortable around them. So you want to see if you can kind of, like you would audit a class, you want to see if you can sit in and experience it and kind of audit the homeschool group. All right, so participating firsthand will give you the best opportunity to decide if the group works for you and your family. The second question is, inquire about the experiences of other families. Just like when you're applying for a job, you ask for references. So with a co-op, you're going to want to see what were other people's experiences. Did they have a favorable experience? Is there something going on in the co-op that you don't want to be associated with? So you want to kind of ask that up front to save yourself if, there's drama in the group and you're somebody who doesn't do drama, you want to kind of know that beforehand so you'll know what you're getting into. So while their experiences may not be the same as yours, you should be able to gauge whether members are satisfied with their overall experience or not. And that's very important. Number 3, find out how often the group meets. So if they're charging $1,000 for the semester, you probably want to meet more than one time a week or one time a month. You want those meetings to be regular. So whatever it is, depending on how much you have to pay to be involved, you want to make sure that it's a regular experience, because ultimately you want your children to build bonds with whoever they're associating with in that group. That's really where those homeschool friendships are formed, and also parent friendships. So you get to know the other parents, who are also on the same homeschool journey as you are. And so you want to make sure that is going to mesh well with you and your family. So, number 4, ask if you can review the schedule for the upcoming year or semester. You want to see if it's, especially if it's a tutorial, you want to see if those classes align with the classes that your child is interested in. So just because they have a tutorial and they're offering, reading and science and math, it may not be the math that your kid wants to take. So you want to find out what that schedule is going to be like and who's teaching it, what their expertise is. The more questions you ask, really, the more informed you'll be, so that you make sure you're making a calculated decision. So, number 5, make sure you have a clear understanding about what the exceptions are for parents and children. So what do I mean? What are the exceptions? So you need to find out if you have to stay the entire time or not. I have attended co-ops in the past, and I promise you, I had to stay the entire time. And I was like, I'm paying for this. I have to be here. And I didn't want to be. So it wasn't a It wasn't a co-op that worked for me. And so you really need to know that beforehand. So if you are somebody who's like, hey, a drop-off program is going to be better for me and my schedule, then you need to know if that is what is involved. Okay. Number 6, what is the mission or goal of the group? And how does that group go about fulfilling its goals? So here's the thing. If their goal is to make all of the kids, shoot rockets, by the end of the semester be able to build and shoot their own rockets, then you need to know that, because perhaps your kid is not interested in rockets at all. And so if your kid is not interested in rockets, you may not want to just push that on them. You may, it depends on you and your parenting style, but you need to know that in advance. So you also need to know if it's a Christian group. So if they are heavily centered in Christian principles, but you're a secular person, that may not be the group for you. You know, you don't want to go into a group and build anxiety. But if you are a Christian and you want a Christian group, then you join that group. It could be a secular group and they could be talking about something that you are not interested in at all, but you kind of have to ask that question in advance. What is your mission? What is your goal? And you make sure that your mission and your goal align together. And that's important. All right. So the next number 7, and this was kind of asked previously. It says, is the group Christian or secular? So before, the question was, what is the mission or goal? So those are actually different, but I said them kind of together, so I apologize. Number 8, ask if there are age requirements for participation with the children, because especially in these homeschool groups, kids don't necessarily go by age. So you kind of have to be careful with that. I mean, they don't go by grades, they go by age. So a lot of homeschoolers may not actually assign an actual grade level to their child. So instead of doing that, they assign, they say, hey, all the 8-year-olds are together and different things like that. So you want to know how they put the kids together to make sure that your kid is in the right group. So if your kid is advanced, perhaps you do want to put them, if they're 8, maybe you want to put them with the 9-year-olds, but it's up to you. But you need to know how they structure that, because in many homeschool groups, they do not go by age, by grade. I apologize. They do not go by grade, which is not unusual in the homeschool environment. So that's something you have to be aware of. All right. And it says, if you have children outside of the required ages, would you still be able to be involved? Because some co-ops and tutorials and homeschool groups are very strict about those age requirements, even if you have a mature child. So you need to find out how strict they are to see if that's going to be a good fit. All right, number 9. If diversity is important to you, ask what makes the group diverse. In my opinion, if my family's first participation in the group suddenly makes it diverse, then it isn't. More families are needed to truly ensure that it's a diverse environment. So I have attended a co-op where when I joined, it became a diverse co-op. That means that it's not diverse. So it has to be more families in order for it to be diverse. And so if diversity is something that is important to you, then you need to ask that up front. And then you probably should talk to whoever those diverse families are and see how they were treated, and also talk to them about are they satisfied with the group? So that is something that is very, very important. And number 10, inquire about fees and dues. Find out when they're due, find out the pay schedule, and if you can do a payment plan over the year. It really depends on your budget, but if you can pay over the year, that's probably going to be more advantageous rather than paying that one lump sum up front. And you can also ask, if you pay all of it for the entire year and you only decide that first semester, by the second semester you decide you don't want to go, can you get a refund? So you want to find out their refund policy as well. And so those are the 10 questions that I encourage you to ask before signing up with any type of co-op, tutorial, homeschool group, or umbrella. All right, so if you have questions, now is the time to put those questions in the comment section. And thank you for joining us. So again, let me know that you're here by putting a comment in the comment section. So we have one comment, and this comment comes from Io. It says, love co-ops. Checked out multiple tutorials in my area, and their pricing was equal to private school. This is true. Yes. In many places, tutorials feel like an actual school. They're like, I'm offering instruction. So they feel like they can charge like for a mini little college class, like you're taking a college course. So they're charging a substantial amount. So you really have to vet and see who are they getting to teach the class? Like, is it worth the money? And you want to look into it. You want to see if other people had good experiences. Are they providing tutoring on the side? Whatever. You want to make sure you're getting your money's worth if you sign up for a tutorial. All right. So we have another comment as well from Io, and it says, some tutorials require expensive textbooks. That is correct. So I am in the state of Maryland, and the tutorials that I am aware of do in fact require that you purchase textbooks that they often have like a textbook fair where they may purchase all of the textbooks and give you an opportunity to purchase the textbook from them. Sometimes they offer that at a discount, sometimes they don't. So that is something that you have to keep in mind as well, because textbooks, if you went to college, then I'm pretty sure you're aware that textbooks are expensive. They are not cheap. And so if you have been purchasing curriculum online for your children, then you also know curriculum is not cheap. While there are some free curriculums, there are some like Time for Learning. There are several free curriculums. Discovery K-12 is also free. There's also the free public schools, but that's totally different and not related. But I will say about the free homeschool curriculums that I have gotten, they're not stellar. So they're not, I wouldn't give, like if I was grading them, I wouldn't give them an A+. So I'm just going to be honest. Like sometimes you'll find errors. Sometimes you'll find things that are incorrect. Sometimes you'll find misspellings. It's just, like if you're paying for something, then that group and that organization is going to have more money to pay for an editor. So that's just something to keep in mind. You do want to be cautious about some free programs. Now, there are some free programs that are funded by other sources, grants and things like that. Like I love BrainPop. BrainPop isn't completely free because they have some a paid service as well. But the free service is just, you don't have access to all of the things that the paid customers have. So that's something that I will say you do have to kind of vet the service and see if that free service is going to be the same caliber as something that you would pay for. All right. So IO also says, check out the uniform policy as well. So yes. So I have not participated in any homeschool groups, tutorials, co-ops, or umbrellas that require uniforms, but there are some that do. And uniforms are pricey. When I was a child, I went to private school and those uniforms cost a lot of money. And so we often would try to see if somebody, another student that aged out of their uniform or outgrew their uniform would actually pass it down. So that is something that, don't join just because of the uniform being expensive. See if you can maybe get some hand-me-downs or something like that if you love everything about that tutorial, homeschool group, co-op, or umbrella. All right, so that is all for today. And I hope that you were able to learn about the homeschool groups, tutorials, co-ops, and also umbrellas. If you have any questions in the future, feel free to send me a message. I am on YouTube at youtube.com/cleverly changing. That is also where the replays for all of my lives will be. So if you are looking for the Cleverly Changing podcast, you can definitely listen on my platform, cleverlychanging.com, but you can also go to YouTube and watch the replays or listen to them. So definitely do that as well. And I just thank you for joining us. Remember to share this conversation with a friend so that they'll be informed and they'll understand. If there are future show topics that you'd like me to cover, hey, let me know. I am very open to talking about other topics as well. Tomorrow at 3, I have a special guest. It is actually an educator. I am so happy he has agreed to talk to us. He was a science teacher. Well, he is a science teacher in the public school system. So he's a certified educator, and his name is Kevin Tom. So he is Mr. Adventures on YouTube. So Mr. Tom Adventures on YouTube. So we will be talking to him on tomorrow at 3. So definitely tune in. And again, if you have questions that come up about homeschooling, feel free to shoot me a line. You can also find me on Instagram at Cleverly Changing, and you can just leave a comment in one of my posts. You can send me a DM, whichever. It's totally fine. But I am here to support you and put these conversations out so that you feel like you are going into homeschooling in a knowledgeable way. I want you to feel supported and just, like you're not starting from scratch. So thank you for tuning in, and I appreciate you guys. All right, bye for now.